I was 12 when this happened, old enough to know when something feels off, but still young enough to catch the attention of weirdos. My family lived in a relatively busy neighborhood, but our street sat at the very end of a cul-de-sac, pressed right. Up against a stretch of forest across from us was a drainage sump, and past the woods there was a small local park. One Saturday night, a small traveling carnival had set up in that park. I didn't have any plans with friends, and my mom, who was never the type to worry about curfews, told me I should check it out. She gave me the freedom to explore, probably too much looking back, so I grabbed a flashlight and headed out through the woods. After pushing through the trees and passing a wire fence, I stepped into a space filled with glowing lights and soft music. The carnival. A Ferris wheel spun slowly in the distance. A few rides whirled with tired energy, and game booths lined the path with flickering bulbs and stuffed prizes. It was getting late, so the crowd had thinned out, making everything feel a bit hollow. Toward the back of the grounds, I saw a large redondite striped tent. People were slipping inside, so I decided to peek in. Inside, a small audience watched three clowns performing on stage, one juggling, one pedaling a tiny tricycle, and one just sort of dancing around aimlessly. That last clown noticed me almost immediately. He broke from the group and skipped toward the tent's entrance, smiling too widely and wagging a single finger at me, motioning for me to come in, or maybe even to join them on stage. Either way, the invitation felt wrong. I stepped back and quietly left. Later, I ran into a friend near the game booths, and we killed about 30 minutes, talking and watching the last few stragglers leave. Soon the place was nearly empty, and the staff began packing up. I said goodbye to my friend and headed toward the fence that led back into the woods. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Was that same clown, the dancer. He had followed me and now stood just a few yards away, grinning. He asked if I wanted to see the backstage area of the tent where they kept all the cool stuff that regular visitors couldn't see. I didn't hesitate. I told him no, and immediately turned toward the forest. I checked behind me several times as I walked, and each time I looked, he was still standing there motionless, that painted smile frozen on his face. Once I was out of his line of sight, I broke into a run. I didn't stop until I felt I was far enough into the woods that he couldn't possibly catch up. I didn't plan on telling my mom. I didn't want to risk losing the freedom she gave me just because I ran into some freak. And walk home was about a half mile. I was most of the way there when I heard a sound again, the same eerie call from before. My stomach turned shaking. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the trees, and there he was, stepping out from the shadows and into the light. That same clown, silent, watching me. He had followed me all the way through the forest. When he got close enough, I panicked and hurled the flashlight at him, then took off running as fast as I could. I could hear him behind me, footsteps crashing through leaves, until I finally saw the end of the trail, the road near my house. The sound stopped. I didn't look back by the time I burst through the door. I was gasping for air. My mom asked if something was wrong, and I just lied, told her I'd jogged the whole way home. She bought it, and I never mentioned the clown again, but I've never forgotten that smile, not once. I used to be terrified of clowns. That fear started when I was around 5, thanks to a run-in with one at a local fair, and it stuck with me until I was about 14. This particular night happened during a school break in November. It was a cold Tuesday evening. My parents were out of town and my siblings were off doing their own thing. That left me home alone until my friend, let's call him B, came over. We'd made plans to walk to a small fair that had popped up just a few blocks from my house. The fair was set up in an empty parking lot, the kind that feels too quiet and too open at night. We wandered around for a while, messing with a few of the games, just killing time. When we saw him, a clown, silent, no voice, no laugh, just exaggerated gestures and a frozen grin. He didn't say a word, but bounced slightly with each step, making strange hand motions as if he was performing an invisible act. Honestly, he seemed more like a mime than a traditional clown. What really got to me was how he kept creeping a little closer every few seconds, inch by inch. B and I laughed it off at first. He even gave the clown a friendly pat on the shoulder before we walked away. That was kinda creepy, B muttered. Yennet. Just weird creepy, I replied. We left the fair and started heading back through the dark neighborhood streets. They were nearly empty. The only sounds were our footsteps echoing off the cold pavement. That's when we started hearing something behind us, more footsteps not matching our rhythm. We glanced back. Nothing, but the sound didn't stop. Every so often we'd hear that same crunch of gravel or scuff of a shoe just a little ways behind. It felt like someone was just out of sight, deliberately keeping their distance. B was starting to freak out. "I'm going home, man," he said. I didn't want to be alone, though not now, so I talked him into coming back to my place to hang out for a bit longer. We finally made it to my front door. I pulled out my keys, fumbling in the dark with the 3 nearly identical ones on the ring. That's when B nudged me hard. "Dude, look." I turned. There was a clown crouched in the neighbor's bushes, motionless, eyes locked on us. It was the same one from the fair. The second he realized we saw him, he stepped out from the bushes and began walking toward us, not running, just calmly advancing with that same painted-on smile. Panic hit me fast. I tried each key in the lock hands, shaking. The first one didn't work, the second didn't either. I could hear his footsteps getting closer. The third key finally turned the lock, and we rushed inside, slamming the door behind. UC grabbed the phone and called my parents. They told us to stay upstairs, lock the door, and grab something to defend ourselves, just in case. B and I ran to my little brother's room and looked out the front window. There he was, standing at the edge of the driveway, just staring up at us. It felt like he wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. I yanked the blinds shut and dropped to the floor beside B. We sat there in silence, barely breathing. After about 10 minutes, we peeked out again. He was gone. Maybe he gave up. Or maybe he just found a better hiding spot. Never found out, but that night still creeps back into my thoughts, sometimes, especially when I'm home alone, and especially when I hear something outside that I can't explain. If you've been following the news lately, you've probably seen the strange reports, clowns spotted in the woods trying to lure people in. I didn't need a news article to believe it. I lived it, and what happened to me still chills me to this day. I'd rather not give my name, just in case whoever or whatever that clown was ever decides to come looking. I was 14 at the time, living in a tiny rural town in South Carolina, barely over 100 people. One of those blink and you miss it kind of places. That summer I had a part-time job at the local lumber yard. It wasn't complicated work, mostly helping load up wood for customers, but it kept me strong and gave me a reason to get out of the house. My home was just about a mile away, so walking back and forth was part of the daily routine. One night I wrapped up my shift around 9:30 p.m. The sun had vanished behind the hills, and the moon had started casting its glow over the winding road home. That stretch of road was remote. No houses, no lights, just thick woods pressing in from both sides. The pavement was new, but there were no sidewalks. Just a narrow path, cutting through trees stacked like walls. Nature was alive around me, frogs chirping, crickets humming, an eerie kind of harmony that filled the air. I popped in my earbuds and let the music drown out the night. It was a walk I'd done countless times. But halfway home, something broke through the rhythm, a shrill, high-pitched laugh that made my blood run cold. I stopped in my tracks, pulled out my earbuds, listened. Nothing, just frogs. Louder than ever. I told myself it was part of the song, or maybe just the wind playing tricks, trying not to overthink it. I kept walking. The next day was quiet. My shift didn't start until 2 p.m., so I left around 1:30. Bright skies, peaceful weather. On the way there I did something I often did, kicked little rocks across the road. The tap of a stone bouncing along fresh asphalt was oddly satisfying, but then one of the rocks landed next to something bright, a red object half buried in dirt. I bent down to look closer. A clown nose. I squeezed it. It let out a sharp squeak. I stared at it, confused. What was a clown prop doing out here in the middle of nowhere? I brought it with me, figuring I'd get a laugh from the guys at work. I even wore it for a second. Got a few chuckles. When my shift ended later that night, I realized I'd forgotten my earbuds. The walk home would be a lot quieter than usual. About halfway back, I spotted a shape in the distance, maybe 150 yards ahead. It looked like a deer standing still in the middle of the road, barely visible through a light layer of fog. The moonlight behind it gave the figure an unnatural glow. As I got closer, maybe within 100 yards, it bolted into the woods. I figured it was just a spooked animal, but as I passed the spot where it had vanished, I started to hear something else. Footsteps, soft at first, but they were definitely behind me. Slowed, confused. That when I heard it, a voice, "Hey there." I turned and froze. Standing in the road was a clown. Dirty, stained clothes hung off his frame, a saggy costume that looked decades old. His makeup was smeared, his face streaked, and his eyes were just black. Cold. He tilted his head slightly and said, "You've got something of mine. I want it back." He laughed just once, a short, sickening sound. I stammered, "I don't have anything of yours," and began to back away. Slowly. My house was still a quarter-mile off the far. That's when he said something I'll never forget. "Well, if you don't have my nosathon, I'll need yours." From behind his back, he pulled out a long blade. I couldn't tell what kind of weapon it was, but it looked like a machete, maybe two. I didn't wait another second. I turned and sprinted full speed right down the center of the road. I could hear him running barefoot, gaining on me and dragging metal, those blades across the pavement. The screech of steel echoed Behind me, broken up by his occasional giggles, I was in great shape from the lumberyard, but even with adrenaline pumping through me, I could still hear him closing the gap. As I reached the top of a hill, I felt him right behind me, almost within reach, and then headlights. A truck was coming over the rizz. I flailed, my arms screaming. The truck slowed. I turned to look. He was gone. No sign of the clown, just an empty road behind. May climbed into the truck breathless and told the driver everything. He called the police. Never walked that road again, never will he. Don't know how that clown got out there or how long he was watching me. There are no homes near that area. No cars ever parked along the road, just forest now. More stories like mine are popping up. Clowns hiding in trees, waiting for people, stalking Themis at a cult. A sick joke taken too far. I don't know, but I'll never see a clown the same way again. That was another true story. If you're still watching, you're one of the brave ones. Most don't make it this far. Subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell because the next horror stories drop soon. Stay scared, stay safe. We'll see you in the dark.